Hello, good afternoon, welcome to Four Wheels and a Seat. My name's Alex Dalrymple and this is my channel where I review new cars every week. And to make sure you don't miss one, please hit the subscribe button and give me a like if you enjoy what you see. And this is the Subaru Forester. And what's new for 2023? Not much. The rear vision mirror now has automatic dimming and it's more expensive, but beyond that, pretty much the same. But, you know, Subaru's philosophy is if you're onto a good thing, stick to it. And there is a bit of demand for this car because when supplies were dwindling back at the end of 2022, the Forester actually wasn't available for a while, but it's back now and still selling like crazy. Now, if you want to check out the last review I did of the Forester, which was about a year ago, you can just click the link up there. Believe me, the car looks pretty much exactly the same. This is the top spec model of the Forester. It's called the S and it gets LED front lights as well as 18-inch alloys. Under the hood, we've got the same 2.5 litre four-cylinder Subaru Boxer engine that has been in there for years, and it still outputs 136 kilowatts of power and 292 Newton meters of torque. Fuel economy, 7.4 litres per 100 kilometres on a combined cycle, which is just sort of okay. It's not a turbo, but it does feel quite zippy. It gets along really, really well. And power is driven to all four wheels by a constantly variable transmission. The only real problem with this engine is that when it's under load, it sounds a bit like a Mazda 323 from the early 80s. It's just a bit tinny or toy-like. Storage in the back is 498 litres and you can pretty much double that with the rear seats down, which you can lower just by pushing the button in the boot. The cockpit of this car is just as button intensive as it was before. Subaru are keeping a lot of functionality out of the center console screen, which is sort of the opposite of what most car makers are doing, but you know what? I don't really have an issue with that. It just does almost feel a little bit overwhelming though, because there are a lot of controls, especially here on the steering wheel. And you know, these days, pretty much every car maker is throwing as much functionality into these center console screens as they possibly can. And you know what? Subaru are just kind of going, nah, we're not going to do that. So the center console screen is actually divided in two. Up on top, we've got a smaller screen which shows you some drive information. You can also show media information on there as well as sort of trip computer type stuff. And the lower screen is more your straightforward infotainment. It's 8 inches, has a nice sharp sort of picture. The software though just does feel like it's sort of a generation behind everybody else. You know, with what Hyundai and Kia are doing with their systems, this just does feel a bit old compared to that. Climate controls, still fully physical operation of that down here on the lower console. We've got a bit of piano black there as well. Oh, and don't forget, Subaru still are putting CD players in their cars. It's right here, but I'm honestly wondering in this day and age of Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, both of which are included in this car by the way, although you will need a USB cable to use them, does anyone actually still use the CD player? Storage space for your phone just underneath that, which is only just big enough for my phone, and my phone is not very big. So that may or may not work for you. Lower console, we've got the big sort of nice old-fashioned gear shifter here. There's no fancy dials or anything like that. We've got the terrain mode selector underneath that, which has a few different modes of snow, dirt, deep snow, and mud. The S model also comes with heated front seats, and you can control those here on the lower console. Got a couple of good-sized cup holders, a pretty small center bin, but it does come with a removable tray and a nice soft lid with a bit of stitching on it. The steering wheel, yeah, there's a lot of buttons on here, and I'm pretty sure this is the same wheel that you will find in, well, pretty much every other Subaru, but I think I've most recently seen it in the WRX. Paddle shifters here on the back of that to change, well, not change gears because there are pretend gears, because this is a CVT. The steering wheel itself has actually quite a nice feel. It's leather wrapped with stitching. The instrument cluster is, again, another place where this car just feels a little bit sort of left behind. We've got two big analog dials there. The design isn't particularly edgy, and a smaller LED screen there, which shows you a digital readout of your speed and a few other adaptive cruise control functions. You can cycle through those options via a control here on the steering wheel. And we've got more buttons down here on the right-hand side. One that I find myself hitting every time I get in the car because it drives me crazy is the automatic on-off for the engine when you're stopped at the lights. Unfortunately, this car doesn't remember when you've turned that off, so you've got to turn it back on. If you're like me and you don't like having it on, you've got to hit that button on every journey. Same with the automatic vehicle hold here, keeping the car still when you apply the brakes. The seats are leather, although they're perforated, there is no seat cooling. And look, for me personally, I don't find them terribly comfortable. There's no lumbar support. I think the lower cushion is just a bit too short for me with my long legs, so I don't really have a lot of support under my knees. And just getting the shape and the position right has been a real challenge actually, and I don't feel terribly comfortable in here, I have to admit, especially on a long trip. The console sort of feels like it's all a bit too low for me, and I'm kind of sitting up high. I would like to be sitting a bit lower in the cabin. So this isn't really the ideal driving position for me. Might work for you, but you know, each to their own. As I mentioned before, I do feel like I'm sitting up quite high, but that does give great visibility out the front. The rear vision mirror is awesome. Like, I can really see a lot behind me, and that's mainly because the rear window is actually a really good size. These wing mirrors are also nice and big. We've got blind spot monitors built into those too. So in terms of having a clear view all around you and in the blind spots, this car is pretty unbeatable. I can't really imagine my kids saying to their friends in the schoolyard, "Oh, my dad's reviewing a Forester this week. Come and see it when he picks me up after school." This car's all-wheel drive capability makes it feel very comfortable and assured on a wet day like today, and the terrain modes mean you can also head off-road for a bit of light to medium off-roading. This car is absolutely packed full of safety technology. It's got everything you could possibly want. It's just perhaps the execution of it that feels a little bit old hat. So rather than having a head-up display, we've got a row of LEDs that reflect off the front windshield there, and depending on the color and the sequence of the lights, it's alerting you to various different things like collision warning or you're drifting out of the lane. It's an interesting way of doing it. There's a few cameras dotted around the outside of this car which really do help with parking, including some here on the wing mirrors that show up on the top screen there that give you a really good view of how close you are to objects when you're parallel parking. Another very cool feature in this car is driver recognition, and it does it just like your phone does with facial recognition. So you can have multiple driver profiles set up on this car, and the car will scan your face when you get in and know who's behind the wheel and set up everything just the way you like it. Not only that, it also monitors you, and I don't mean that in any sort of nefarious kind of way. It's not reporting back to base, but if you take your eyes off the road, you will get an alert on the screen saying, "Keep your eyes on the road," and it starts flashing on 2 of the 3 screens here. So on paper at least, I am smack bang in the middle of the demographic for this car. I'm a early to mid 40s dad. That hurts to say. 2 kids, a wife. We do lots of stuff on the weekend. We do the occasional road trip. There's heaps of room in here for everyone. We've got USBs in the back. There is so much safety gear in here. It is crazy. This car ticks every box, except one. And that is, it's not very dynamic. It's just not that exciting to drive. And I like cars that are exciting to drive. So for me, I'd be leaning more towards maybe a Mazda CX-5 or a Ford Escape, something that's will get my heart pumping a little bit. But if you're not after that, and you're after a sensible family mobile that you can go away on holidays with, maybe go camping because of the off-road capability and the terrain modes, then the Forester could well be the SUV for you.